Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody, on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA. My name is Michael Morgenstern, and I am an educator at the museum. And this afternoon, you have the honor and privilege of listening to Joe Alexander, a Holocaust survivor who will share his story with you. And afterwards, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. Before we begin, I would like to share a quick history of our museum. Holocaust Museum LA was founded in the early 1960s by a group of Holocaust survivors who wanted to make sure the world would always remember and learn from this tragic history. In the early 1960s, most survivors were not yet ready to relive their trauma, largely because most people were not yet ready to listen to them. But thanks to the courage and foresight of this group of survivors, we have what became the first and oldest Holocaust museum in the United States, always with a mission to commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations. We can't do the work that we do today without our survivor community, who still on a regular basis shares their stories with groups, specifically the future generations who will make sure to carry forward this history. Today is also Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and so today we think about those who perished and honor those who survived, and we do everything to honor their legacy and their memory. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your story with us on Yom HaShoah.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
And you may begin.
My name is Joe Alexander. I'm a Holocaust survivor from Poland, and I survived 12 camps. I come from a small town in Poland, and I had parents, had 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and I'm the only survivor. My father was in business, and we had a very good life in Poland until 1939, when the Germans came into Poland. They divided Poland in 2 halves. One half was annexed to the Third Reich, to Germany. The second part was Poland under German occupation. We lived at the part where it was annexed to the Third Reich. And every town in Europe had a town square, and the town square is where most of the business are. We lived in the town square. The second house in one corner of the square, and the third house was an uncle of mine. After a few weeks, the Germans came into town and went after my uncle around the square and told everybody they have 10 minutes to get their possessions and get out in the middle of the square, and they took them away. Right away, a rumor started that they're gonna come back later and take the rest of us. For some reason, I don't know why, they left us where we were the second house, those 3 houses that they left. Anyway, so Dad said, we're not going to wait for them to come and get us 10 minutes. So he got out, he rented a wagon. We had deep wagons in Europe, about 6, 8 feet deep, and picked up most of the stuff from the store. And they put a few pieces of bedding on top, a couple pieces of furniture. And my parents and my one brother and one sister, they left and went to the other part of Poland where my father had 3 sisters living, about 25 kilometers before Warsaw. So they left. But the reason we put the bedding on top, because from our part to the other part, you have to go through a border so that they're moving. And I remained with 2 older sisters, and we were loading up a second wagon. And in the meantime, they had the Polish people coming from around town, coming to town to buy anything they can get. So I sold a man a bicycle and a boat of shirt material. On the way home, he had to pass the police station and he got stopped. He wanted to know where did he get that material. He said, I bought it. Then show me a receipt. I says, I don't have a receipt. Then go bring the person who sold it to you. So it came back to me and I said, they have to come with me. If not, they're going to come here. And we had a wagon loaded, ready to go. So I went with him and he asked me, did you sell him this? I said, yes. Why didn't you give him a receipt? I said, we in Poland, we didn't give receipts. So I took his boat until you smacked the guy go and let me go. And I went back and my sisters were waiting for me and we took off. And we went to a little town named Blonia, about 25 kilometers before Warsaw. So we come there people were still in business and life was going on almost normal. But except everybody has to go to work. So that's being there for about 2 weeks. I went to my first camp. I went to a camp where you work during the week. On the weekend, you can go home. So, but the work we were doing, we were building a canal and it stayed in the water up to the knee without boots. And that was in October, November. And I was getting blood poisoning. I had sores on my arms, on my legs. So one weekend I go home and I said, I'm not coming back. So Monday morning, the police came to look for me. And my dad said, he's not here. He's supposed to be in the camp. So I stayed away from home for a while, figuring things would cool off. And that was the time when they started to build the wall in Warsaw, where the Warsaw Ghetto was going to be. So after they got through building the ghetto, the walls, so they came out the order within 50, 60 kilometers in the surrounding area of Warsaw. All the Jews had to move in to the ghetto. So we moved into the ghetto, and you can't imagine how miserable, how terrible what life was, because they picked out where the section where the ghetto was going to be was a small area, and they put 260,000 people in. So life was very bad. So I lived in the ghetto for about 5 months, and we did find out that back home, since we left, nothing has changed. Everything remained the same. So my parents decided for an older sister and a younger brother and I, we should go back home. So go back home, you have to get out of the ghetto. So I had to pay off the guard at the gate to get out, and we got out. And we decided my sister and brother would take one street and I'll take another street. And we walked through town we meet on the outskirts of town. I walked for about 2 or 3 blocks, and I had a Polish teenager comes over and said, "Give me some money, I'm going to deport you." So I figured I gave him some money, I got rid of him, and I kept walking. But he got on a streetcar, rode the streetcar for a few blocks, and he comes over again, "Give me some more money." So this time I gave him some more money, and I changed the street, and I lost him. And I walked to the outskirts of town, and I met my sister and brother, and we went home. So came back home. Like I say, everything was, since we left, nothing changed. But being there for 3 days, after the 3 days, they came out and ordered all the Jewish men from 16 to 60 report to the schoolhouse. So I report to the schoolhouse, and off I went to the camps. I went to the camps. So the first camp I went to, we were building a dam. Building a dam is a cut down hills, and you had the little electric cars. You fill them up, and you take them. They take them to another place, and they dump it. It was very hard work because we had to use picks to loosen up the ground. And the food you were getting was a piece of bread like this in the morning, and a cup of coffee, and you went to work. You came back from work, you got a soup, which most of the time was from the peels from potatoes or spinach. Doing the kind of work we were doing with this food, you couldn't survive. Actually, I was in a camp it was around a city named Poznan. And there were a lot of sub-camps in the city and sub-camps around the city. So people were dying every day. Every morning they take dead people out. So there wasn't too many people left the camp. So they combined 2 or 3 camps into one. And after a while, the same thing happened at the other camps. That's why I was moved around. I was in 12 camps altogether. So the next camp I was laying cobblestones in the street. That lasted for a while. Then I was moved to another camp. We were building sewers. So there, that was finished. And I went to another camp in the city, and we were building an airport. I was laying railroad tracks. And so forth, all different little camps. And after being about 7 camps already, train arrived, and it wasn't a passenger train, a cattle car train with got a 2 feet window in, and they put 40 to 50 people in one boxcar. And the destination you were going takes 5 to 6 hours. Well, it took us 3 days, and we have now gone with no food, no water, no facilities. And we arrived in Auschwitz after 3 days. By the time the train arrived, and there's a little city named Auschwitz. So the train stopped downtown at this city, because later on they built the trains to go straight into the camp. But that time they didn't have yet. So it stopped downtown, and they opened the doors, and 30–40% of the people were dead on the train already. Whoever could walk, he walked out. They were lined up in rows of 5, and we met Dr. Joseph Mengele. He was called the doctor of death. He selected people for human experiments or for the gas chamber. So Dr. Mengele said, there's 6 kilometers to walk to the camp. He's going to select people to go to the left and the people on the left are going to be taken on trucks. So he went through and he picked out sick people, old people, young kids, and picked me out too to go to the left. If I would come from home, I wouldn't know the difference. But I was there in 7 camps. In every camp I was, I had to go to work. I always tried to get in with the biggest, strongest man. And here I look around, I see sick people, old people, young kids. That's not the kind of people I like to be with. So my luck was after midnight. I don't know, if daytime, I don't know if I could have done it. When Dr. Mengele moved further down, I ran back to the other side. If I didn't run back to the other side, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Because the people on the left who were talking on trucks, they went straight to the gas chamber. So I went back to the other side and we walked to the camp, to Auschwitz. Walked to Auschwitz, I got a shower, and I came out of the shower and I got a tattoo. You can see that's a number, 142584. That was from that moment on, that this was your name. You had no name anymore. And I got the tattoo and we walked over, there's Auschwitz II, which is called Birkenau, about 3 kilometers. And walked over to Birkenau, and I was in Birkenau for quite a while. And I saw Dr. Mengele 2 more times in Birkenau, but it was daytime, he was far away from where I was. So I got through. And then they were taking some people out. The camp was getting very small because Dr. Mengele kept coming and taking people. So I was trying to get out if they sent, because they take people out sending to subcamps. But for a while I didn't do it. But then they came up and they said they need tailors. My grandfather and my father, we were all tailors. So I report and they come right in front of me. We have enough, you go back. We don't need any more. So I'm still back in the camp. And being in Birkenau, the life, people just gave up. I saw people running to the electric fence to get electrocuted. I saw people being beaten to death because they gave up. So then, after this, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising started. And once there was, I guess, over or something, they said they need a big transport, but they didn't want to take any people from Poland. Only one from Hungary, Greece, Italy, anybody but Polish. But on the end, they were short about 300 people for the amount they wanted. So they said, no, we'll take some Polish people. So I report and got on the train, the same thing, about 3 days drive around back to Warsaw. And we come back to Warsaw. For me, I was there for the second time for me to go back to the Warsaw Ghetto. Come back, there was no buildings left. Only the remaining walls were burned out. The buildings were burned out. And there was no camp. So they gave us some prefabs. We had to put together our own camp. But in the meantime, until we did, I was wearing a shirt. There was no shirt left with shreds, was eaten up from lice. Then we built the camp. On Sunday, we went to get a shower and got some fresh clothes. So, but I came back, so the work we was doing was taking down those remaining walls brick by brick and clean them up and put them up in stacks of 8, 10 feet high. In the meantime, the typhus broke out. Typhus broke out, you get very high fever, high temperature. So people report to the hospital. I never knew anybody who came out of the hospital. I got the temperature. I didn't want to go to the hospital. So I had a couple, we called like a foreman. He was a middle-aged German man, but he was also a prisoner. So he didn't care if we worked or he didn't work. So when I got it, I was sitting behind those bricks with my arms crossed over like this for about 3 days until I got over that temperature and went back to work. So I went back to work. So I worked for a while. And then one night, the Polish underground attacked our camp. They were trying to free us, but they were unsuccessful. So the next morning, they closed the camp and took us out. So to get out of town, we had to jog because they said they were afraid that the underground may attack us in the camp in the city to free us. So we had to jog to get out. So we got out city about late in the afternoon, and they put us up on a big field where the farmer grazed their cows. And the ground is very moist ground. So whatever means you had, a knife, a spoon, anything, you could dig up some mud. And you took the bottom of your shirt and you squeezed the mud to get a little water. So we had a little water and start walking. We come to the city and there was a river. So they let us go to the river to get some water. And two of our people went a little too far into the river. They thought maybe they're going to escape, get out on the other side. So they got cut, they were shot in the river. So we got some water, now we're walking, and we come to the next town with the same river. So they said, this time you can only go 100 people at a time to go to the river to get some water. So we got some water and we start walking. And that day it was very heavy rain was coming down. We were soaking wet. You could hardly walk even. Until we arrived at the railroad station. And in the morning, a train arrived. And we got on the train. And this time we were 3.5 days on the train. We went to Germany to a camp named Dachau. Dachau was the first camp Hitler built for political prisoners. Then he turned it into a concentration camp with the gas chambers and the oven. So I came to Dachau for about 2 weeks. I didn't do anything because they were establishing within 50, 60 kilometers, 12 camps in the surrounding of Dachau. 12 camps, they all by numbers from 1 to 12. Then I was sent to a camp number 1, where I was working for a farmer digging potatoes. That lasted about 3 days. And then I was sent to a city named of Landsberg am Lech, about 50 kilometers from Dachau, was camp number 7. Camp number 7 was a small camp with about 150 people. And with the only camp I was with, where women were in the same camp, but they were blocked off by a wire fence, and we went to work together. So I came to camp number 7, where we were a small group that we were in the camps over 4 years already. So we had the privilege of getting the better jobs in the camp. So my friends worked in the kitchen, some of them were the police in the camp, and a couple of them one was a carpenter, one was a blacksmith, and I got a group of 10. We were 5 girls and 5 boys. And he walked right outside the fence to a kitchen for the German guards. And I had two German men in charge of the kitchen, but they were very nice men. They were very good to me. Because every day I was going back to the camp, I took some food back, my friends, and we always had some soup left over. So I took a milk can and put it in, and the next morning people were going to work. They had to pass by our kitchen. So I stopped them and I gave them some food. So a couple of times the officer in charge of the guards complained that I'm holding the people up from going to work. So my people said, let him talk, don't worry, do what you're doing. And that lasted for quite a few weeks. Actually, until April 28th, all the 12 subcamps, we had to go back to Dachau. It was April 28, 1945. I had to go back to Dachau. So I stayed in Dachau overnight on the big field there. And the next morning, we were going what they called a dead march. They're supposed to take us in the mountain. There's a ski resort named Garmisch-Partenkirchen. And that's where they're supposed to kill us. However, we walked for about 2 days, and we knew we're not going to be walking too far because we could hear the fighting. So we knew that the American troops are not far behind us, and the planes were coming bombing the city. So I walked for about 2 days, and we crossed a little bridge, and that little bridge was blown up. So our group was divided in half. So I was on the half where we were in a village named Königsdorf, and there was a little forest in that village. So they took us into the forest, and they asked the volunteers to take the sick people in to the village, into the farmers, and put them into the farmers, to the barn of the farmers. One of the volunteers was a friend of mine. So on the way back, they found a dead horse in the snow. So they cut off some pieces from the horse, and a friend of mine brought me some piece of meat and say, do something. Here's a picture of my friend. You see, that's him here. His name was Joe Buddha. And he brought me that piece of meat and do something. So I made a fire, barbecue, and believe me, that was the best meal we had in a long time. And during the night, the guards disappeared. We didn't know until the next morning, because the next morning, the German police came and they took us into that village and they disappeared. It was the morning about between 8, 9 o'clock, and they disappeared. And so we just walked around the village, didn't know what happened, what's going to happen. So until about between 12 and 1 o'clock, an American tank moved in and we were liberated. American tank moved in, and behind the tank were the troops. So they're trying to block off the village, not to let anybody out. But we were a group of 9 of us. We didn't want to get blocked in. So we broke through and we walked to see where the next town is. So we walked actually for about 1 or 2 kilometers, and there was a bakery. So I went into the bakery and everybody got a bread. You had a bread, you were okay. And you kept walking, coming to a town, and you see 3 American soldiers walking. They're trying to walk. They were so drunk they couldn't walk. They were holding on to each other. And I guess the clothes we were wearing. So they asked, are you Polish? We said, yes. So I said, come on. and took us into a underground bunker. It was a warehouse. You couldn't see the end of it. There was so much stuff in there. So the first thing, we changed clothes. Everybody took a backpack. Excuse me, a backpack, and put some food in. And then there was a big row of bicycles chained up. So they broke the chain, everybody got a bicycle. And now we have to find a place to stay because when the American troop came into the village, they brought all the people into that city. It used to be a German Air Force base. They made a DP camp, a displaced person camp. But we didn't want to go to a camp. So we're trying to get out on the street. You couldn't get out. It was after 6 o'clock, and 6 o'clock was curfew. So we hopped over about 2 or 3 or 4 fences. And we came to a German inn. It was taken over by the American troops. Then in the back of the inn, there was an empty house, so we took over the house. So we stayed in the house for 10 days. And they came out with the order, anybody who lives outside of the camp has to move into the camp. So we had to move into the camp, and we were taken back to another camp in Munich, but you were free. You could live at the camp, or you can go any place you want. So myself and a few friends of mine, we decided to go back to the city of Landsberg, where camp number 7 was. But we went to the city. Landsberg had the largest DP camp in Germany. So we went to the camp and they registered, and they gave us a room. We stayed overnight. And the next morning, I moved out about 7 kilometers from town to a farm, and I lived in a farmhouse. The reason we went to the camp to register, because I didn't want to live in the camp, but we went to lots of camps to register, because in case anybody from your family survived, so everybody went to check the lists. That's why we went to camps to register. So I lived in the farmhouse for about 6 weeks. And then I decided to go back home to Poland to see if anybody in my family survived. Because when I got out of the Warsaw Ghetto, I left my parents, 2 sisters, and 1 brother in the Warsaw Ghetto. And I never found out what happened to them. And my sister and brother came out with me from the Warsaw Ghetto. When I was taken to the camp, and a few weeks later, they were taken to a ghetto named Lodz. So the only thing I know, I had 1 letter from my sister that they picked up. They took my little brother, he was 12 years old. And at that time, they didn't have the gas chambers yet. So they were gassing people on trucks. They were running trucks on wood and put the fumes inside. And he was taken to a camp named Helmno. That's the only thing I know what happened to him. And to the sister, I never know what happened. So I was living on the farm, like a farmhouse in the village, for about 6 weeks. And I decided to go back to Poland, to my hometown, and to go to the house to see if any of my family survived. So I came to the house, and there were survivors living on the 2nd floor. On the 1st floor was the Polish people, but they said nobody in my immediate family came back, except 1 cousin of mine. He was 2 years younger than I. We grew up together. We were in some of the camps together. Matter of fact, I was with him and two of his father's brothers, two of his uncles. We came to Auschwitz together. And when Dr. Mengele told me to go to the left, that's when we were separated. So he survived, but he's in a different town. In that time, it was very bad for survivors who came back to Poland. Because when they took the Jews out, they moved into the homes. And now some of the survivors are coming back. So they were killing a lot of survivors because they didn't want to give up the home. So he told me my cousin survived, but he's in a different town. So I went and I got him, and we were going back to Germany. We went back to Germany, and I lived in Germany for 4 more years because you didn't have a passport, you couldn't go any place. So I have to wait until some country opens up. So after 4 years, Canada said they'll take some in. So I went to register, and you have to wait until they call you. Took a long time, you didn't hear anything. Then a friend of mine lived in the next village, said, you can go now to Munich and register to go to America. So I went to Munich and registered, and it took about maybe 2 weeks. I got a note to go to see the American doctors to check you out, and then the FBI. So I went through the FBI, and then I got an order to go to the port. German is a port called Bremenhaven, where the boats are. And to go there to get the boat to come to America. So I went there. So I got on the boat, and we were on the ocean for about 10 days to come across to, came to America, came to New York. And everybody came to New York, whatever had to have a sponsor. Either you had the relatives here to sponsor you or an organization. I didn't have any relatives, so I was sponsored by the Joint Jewish organization. And my contract was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. You know, the reason everybody had to have a contract for 5 years, that you won't be a burden to the government. So my contract was Harrisburg, and I was sent to Harrisburg, and I worked as a tailor for a man who had a cleaning store and tuxedo rental. But the man was so good to me that a father couldn't be any better. So I was there about 6 months, because after I came in May 1949, and the cousin who survived, he had an uncle here in Santa Monica. So he came in October. And he came to Santa Monica, and he told the uncle that I'm in Pennsylvania, and we were the only 2 survivors from both of our families. So the uncle called me a few times, I should come here so we can be together. So I came to California in 1950, and so here I am. Now let me show you, I can show you some of the pictures here. You can see.
Joe, I can show this photo for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, see, that's the way we lived in the camps. There were like shelves, and there was one section was for 3 people. If you see on the second row, way on the end, right there, you know, if you heard about Elie Wiesel, who wrote a lot of books about the Holocaust. That's him right there. That picture was taken in Buchenwald.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. If anybody has any questions, please use those watching on Zoom can use the Q&A box, and those watching on Facebook can use the comments, and we'll answer as many questions as possible. While I'll give you a minute to think of some questions, I'm going to show some of Joe's photos.
This was a picture, as you see, the top right. That was my father. And next to him is his brother. The brother didn't want to go to the army in Poland, so he went to England. And these were my grandparents. That picture was taken in 1923 at the Polish border, because my uncle couldn't come back to Poland because he ran away, didn't want to go to the army. So they went to the border of Poland, and that was this picture was taken, 1923. And that was my oldest sister. Her name was Shalamas. That's the only picture I have. I don't have any other pictures. That's the cattle car train. The box, you see that box? There's the doors. They get in, and you close the doors, and there's a little window on the other side, about 2 feet, and they put in 40 to 50 people in one car like this. And that's where we were riding around for days. This is my liberation from Dachau.
I also want to point out that you can see Joe's tattoo clearly here. It's a little hard to see on the camera, but in this photo you can see it very clearly for anyone who is curious.
142584. This is the picture, see? The man on the left, the tall guy, that was my friend Joe Buddha, who brought the horse meat, the piece of horse meat. And that's me in the middle. And on the right, that was my cousin who survived. And this picture was taken actually in front of the farmhouse where I lived. I lived on the second floor there. This is a driver's license in Germany, and that is a lifetime. There's no expiration date on this. That's the liberation from Dachau. And there's the boat. That boat was the SS Stewart. But I came to the United States. It was an American military transport boat.
Thank you so much for sharing.
You
We do have some questions. Can you please share with us how you were able to start your life and start living again after you were liberated, having no possessions or anything on you?
Well, when I lived in the 4 years in Germany, well, I wasn't going to go to the Germans to give me a job or something. So actually what I was doing black market. We had an American base about 2-3 kilometers from where I lived. And so we had the American soldiers were coming, and we was selling them French cognac. And so we doing some other things. So to stay alive. So that's what we were doing.
Thank you very much. what are your thoughts on Holocaust denial and how can we combat this?
Well, when I talk to the high school students, anybody, I tell them there's a lot of Holocaust deniers today. And there's some say that they're deniers, they say that the Holocaust never happened. I call them they're crazy because the evidence is still in existence today. You go to all the camp, Auschwitz, Dachau, Majdanek, Treblinka, that all the ovens in the gas chambers are still there. You have people coming there, thousands of people daily with buses driving up, people from all over the world. That's why I said they're crazy. So I said, don't listen to them, what they say. And if you hear anything, it's not right, don't be afraid to report to the authorities.
You for sharing. Were you close with many other survivors in California?
Yes, I was. I was very close with some of them. Matter of fact, I have a picture here of a couple. See, there's a couple they met in camp number 7, what I told you, I were with women. They met at the camp, in the camp, and then after we got liberated, they got married. And I met him when I was in Auschwitz, and I met her in the camp here. So we were friends for 73 years. We never lost touch. Even after we were liberated, I came here to California and Pennsylvania, California, and they came to Detroit. They went, but we always were in touch. Matter of fact, this picture was taken in Detroit until about 4 years ago. I think they passed away in 1 week, both of them. He died on Monday and she passed away on Thursday. So we were friends for 73 years. And I had some other friends who survived, but unfortunately, they're all gone. I don't have anybody left that I know of. I had some, I'm still in very close touch with some of the children from the survivors. Matter of fact, this couple, they have two daughters here in California. Matter of fact, I had yesterday, she teaches Holocaust, one of the daughters teaches Holocaust study in Sinai Temple here. And that's when I was yesterday afternoon talking to her group at Sinai Temple. And then I have another friend who has lived in England. She was here at the museum, see me talking, and she found out that her father was from my town, my hometown. She came to see me, she wanted to know if I knew her father. We were very close, kid before the war. We get it every day almost playing soccer. And we still very close to touch with them.
Thank you so much for sharing. One of our viewers would like to know if you knew her family in Los Angeles. They were Greek survivors, Morris Venezia and his brother Shlomo and their cousin Dario Gabai. Did you ever meet them?
No, I don't recall. I knew some Greek people here in California. I knew I had some. Matter of fact, there was a Greek couple. I mean, actually, she wasn't Greek, he was Greek. And we used to go out with other friends for quite some time, but I knew he was Greek, but I didn't realize that one night we were sitting at a friend's house and we were talking about and I mentioned the Warsaw Ghetto. He says, wait a minute, I was there because I mentioned I had to witness in the Warsaw Ghetto, we had to witness one of Greek men tried to escape and he was cut. And then on Sunday, we had to watch him being hung. So I mentioned about this, the friend, he says, I was there too. I wasn't the same in the Warsaw Ghetto. But before we didn't know, he didn't know that we knew each other. So actually I watched three times people being hung in 3 camps because people trying to escape and they got cut. And on Sunday, we had to gather around to watch him being hung. There were 3 times I saw that. And then I had there's another Greek friend I have here in the valley, but his name is Menashe Ashkenazi. So that's the only Greeks I know here. And and a funny thing, talking about the Greeks, I was invited in 1915 by the German government to come to Dachau to celebrate 70 years the liberation of Dachau. So I went back and I saw here, I don't know if you have this picture, Michael, Angela Merkel.
I don't have it, but we can see it.
I spoke to Angela Merkel here in Dachau. One picture, there's another one here. So I was there, and then after we heard her speak, we went into a tent, a big tent. There were 2,000 people, went in for lunch. And we come into lunch, and by the time I got into the lunch, I was stopped on the way it was a prince of Bavaria, wanted to take pictures with me, some other people. By the time we got in, Riva and I were there, we got in, and there was no seats left. So I was standing and looking, and then I saw one table. It looked like there were 2 seats there. I said to Riva, to my girlfriend, Riva, go grab those 2 seats. So she took those 2 seats, and there were 4 women at the table. 2 of them were sisters, and they were from Greece. So she told me she's Greece. So I told her about the story about I saw the Greece men being hung. She said, you know what? Wait a minute. That was my uncle. So I remember my uncle, and he had a brother. And we were standing watching being hung. He fainted, and myself and another friend of mine, we grabbed him before he hit the ground. She said, that was my uncle. What a coincidence. From, let's say, over 2,000 people in there, and that was only about the 2 seats left. They were the daughters from that man who his father, their uncle was being hung. So that's a coincidence. That's what about the Greek people.
Thank you so much for sharing this story with us. Somebody would like to know a little bit more about the Warsaw Ghetto when you went there to clean up after the uprising. Can you share a little bit more about that and what you did?
Well, what we did, I said, that's all we did there is to clean, take down brick by brick from the walls and clean them up and put them up in stacks. Stacks about 8-10 feet high. That's the only job we did there. But that was one of the best camps we had because we found a lot of stuff and the burned out houses, kitchenware, clothing, pieces of furniture. And we had the Polish people were coming in with horse and wagon, and they were taking the bricks to the railroad station because they're sending them back to Germany. So when they came in, the Polish people with the horse and wagon, they brought bread, salami, sardines, all different kind of food, and we found all this stuff. So we traded. So we had plenty of food there. And that was the job we had to do in the Warsaw Ghetto until they were liberated and I went to Dachau.
You so much for sharing. Did you stay in touch with your uncle who went to England before the war?
Actually, I did try to get in touch with him in 1946 when I was in Germany, but I found out that the uncle passed away. So I couldn't get in touch with him. But later on, in the years I was trying, I knew he had a son and a daughter. But I was trying to I couldn't find out. In 1972, I went to Israel with my family. And on the way back, I said, I'm going to stop in London to see if I can find out. So actually, I was in touch with a cousin of mine. I got in touch for a while, and then she passed away. So I said, oh, stop in London. I stopped in London. I went to the address I had for my cousin who passed away. I went there and actually found out that's how I found out that she passed away. There was a man there, he says, the woman who passed away is not there, but next block here, there is a man who had a shoe store, which a brother-in-law of her daughter. So he took me over to a brother-in-law, and right away we got in touch. And my uncle's son, the cousin, lived about 2 blocks from there. So he came over, and then we went to my cousin, to the daughter, the one cousin. So that's how I found him. So I found him, and I got in touch with my cousin and his family. He had 1 daughter, and I'm still in touch now. The only one left is the daughter, who's still left in England, and we're in touch with her.
Thank you so much for sharing. Did you start a family when you came to the United States?
Yes, I got married, and I have a daughter and a son.
Do you have any grandchildren?
I have 1 grandson.
Thank you for sharing. At what point did you feel comfortable sharing your story?
Well, I wasn't talking, actually the first time was in 1994 when I made a tape, for the Shoah Foundation, with the Spielberg Shoah Foundation in 94. And then after that, not until 1997, I had a friend of mine here. He was also a Holocaust survivor. He was on the kinder transport from Germany. So he belonged to an organization here, a group called the Exchange Club in Culver City, where they met every Tuesday for lunch. It was a mixed group, Jews and Gentiles. So one day he said, Joe, why don't you come with me for lunch? And so I went with for lunch, and then said, why don't you can tell them what your story. So that's the first time was in 1997. And then I had a neighbor later on, a woman who was teaching Holocaust study at the on the synagogue, at the synagogue, Betan. She was teaching 8th graders. So she said, come and talk to my students. So I was talking with the students for quite a while. Then one day I got a call from a man who actually, he was a member of the Holocaust Museum, Los Angeles. And he found out through his son somehow that I'm a Holocaust survivor. So he gave me a call and wanted to talk to me. And I talked to him. That was probably about 5 years ago or so. And he asked me if I want to come to speak at the museum. So that's when I started to speak at the museum, and I still do.
Thank you so much for sharing, and we're so happy to have you as one of our regular speakers. How do you feel about Germans today?
Well, today it's a different German. The young people today, they're completely different. They're more, because when I was back here in 2015, went to Dachau, and they paid everything for me. And anytime we were treated, you couldn't ask for better treatment, because we were celebrating day and evenings with all different organizations, different places. And anytime there were always some volunteers, any place you wanted to go, there was somebody right there to take you. So it's a different Germany today. And I'm still in touch, actually, with a couple. When I was back there in 15, I met a couple, a man and a husband and wife there. And one of the men, he is the one they were trying to restore the camp number 7 in Landsberg. They're trying to restore it to how it was before. So he found out that I was in Camp 7. He took me to the camp to try to let him know the layout of the camp, where, what was, and how. And then he drove us back to Dachau. And since then, we're in touch all the time now, coming back and forth with giving information, all different informations and everything. Every day, even now for Passover, even I got an email to wish us a happy Passover for all the holidays. So we're still in touch with them right now.
Thank you so much for sharing. Have you returned to Poland, and what has that experience been like?
Actually, I've been back 3 times. Well, the first time, like I told you, I went back right after I was liberated. Then I went back again in 2004. I went with my girlfriend, Riva. We went back and we went to the camps, went to my hometown. And there's my hometown, there's not one Jew left. There's nobody there. I went to the camps. Matter of fact, I went to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, actually, before I went to Auschwitz, I met a group from Israel, some students who were going to the camps. I met them in Krakow on a Saturday, and then Sunday we met in Birkenau, in Auschwitz, and the barrack I lived is still there. They kept a few of them for tourists to see what it looks like. So I opened that door, and they were taking pictures. Me opened the door, the barracks I lived in Birkenau. So then I went back again in 2011, and I took my daughter and her husband. So we went to the camps and everywhere to my hometown. And some of the people asked me, why did you come back? So, I told them I came back because I survived. Hitler didn't. That's why I came back.
Thank you so much for sharing. One of our viewers would like to know, what do you attribute your incredible strength to?
Well, my strength is I get my strength from God, the man upstairs, because you can see I have so many cases, times. For instance, I got out of the Warsaw Ghetto. If I didn't get out of the Warsaw Ghetto, I would be where my parents and brothers and sisters are. So God let me out from the ghetto. And then when I came to Auschwitz, and Dr. Mengele told me to go to the left. So then the God told me to run back to the other side. If I didn't run back to the other side, I wouldn't here be talking to you. So, and I've been asked for students when I used to go to schools, and they used to ask me, because I told them that so the people giving up learning to the electric fence in Birkenau or being beaten to death because they gave up. But they asked me, did you ever think of giving up? I said, no, I never gave up. I never lost faith. I never stopped believing in God. And I said that I may have a bad day today, but I hope tomorrow will be a better day. But never give up.
Thank you so much. And as a similar question, what would you like this audience to take away from learning your talk, and specifically on today, Yom HaShoah?
Well, what I like to take away is they murdered 6 million Jews, 1.5 million kids. They didn't murder them because they were criminals or did anything wrong, just because they were Jews. So this is why we have to now educate the young people what happened, because there's anti-Semitism going on. I say, don't listen to them. And then that's the only way today is through education. That's the main thing, is to educate the young people so that that doesn't happen again.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today. And not only today, but all the times that you do this on such a regular basis, and you speak so frequently to students, the future generations, to make sure that our future will always remember and carry forward this history. We thank you so much for speaking today. Thank you so much to our audience for tuning in today. And just want to acknowledge our survivor community today on Yom HaShoah, and just let everyone know that we are thinking of our survivors and their families today. And of course, I'm sure many people who are listening to this talk are thinking of their own relatives who perished in the Holocaust. And this is just one day a year that hopefully the world can think about this, but we are dedicated every day to preserving the memory of the Holocaust. So please follow our website to learn about how you can visit the museum and listen to our future events, which we do still have virtually quite often, but we do have in-person events as well. So please visit our website. Thank you again so much, Joe, for everything that you do for our community and for our future.
Thank you, Michael, very much. And thank everybody for listening. And come to visit the museum.